10, 9, ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
Liftoff, and the clock is starting.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And it is a giant leap for us as well, right off the deep end. Welcome to Kerbalcast. It is the very first podcast devoted exclusively to Kerbal Space Program, and I am Biff Aldrin. I am your LMP, also known as your Lunar Module Pilot, and with me, my Command Module Pilot, my CMP,
Nostromo.
And that's two words, and by the way, these are our actual names. Our parents did not like us very much.
They was deliberate, I think.
And I think that's why you and I get along, because we have that trauma in our past. Let's talk a little bit about Kerbal Space Program, first of all. Obviously, it's a space simulation game. The main characters are called Kerbals, little green bug-eyed guys. They live on a planet called Kerbin. And the whole point of the game, you build your own spacecraft, you get them up into orbit, you try and land on other moons and other planets, you get points. The more points you get, the more parts you unlock. Although I will say, I think it can be argued that the actual point of the game is to kill Kerbals.
Oh, then I'm winning. I'm actually doing
well. There you go.
Okay,
yeah.
I was worried.
It's like, set them on fire, blow them up, smash them into things at high speed, strand them in space. You've done that.
Yeah, see, I'm kind of new to it, so I'm holding back. I don't read their names, so I don't feel as bad.
The one, everybody talks about Jebediah. I actually, when I first started playing the game, I killed Jebediah, and he disappeared off of my astronaut roster. And so for like 2 days, I walked around, and I was all sad, like, I killed Jebediah.
Like you killed the most famous one.
Yeah, I killed the most famous one. And then like 2 days later, he came back, and I was, oh, thank God, Jebediah is back.
So it's like whenever, your goldfish dies, but all of a sudden there's a new one just like it with the
and
same
it looks
name.
exactly the same. Yeah, they should call him Lazarus.
Yeah.
The number of times you kill him and resurrect him, it should be Lazarus. Well, now you mentioned that you are just starting the game, and I want to thank you for being on the podcast with me. And the reason is this. I have played the game probably about a year. According to Steam, I've got about 500 hours on the game and counting. Okay? I am a mid-level player. I am through the steep learning curve. Hopefully, a year from now, I'll be a better player than I was a year ago. I think the majority of the players out there are either going to be mid-range players like me or beginners like you. And I thought it would be really neat to have you on the program, and we can kind of chart your progress. Okay?
Okay, yeah.
Now tell me what your experience has been with the game so far, because you've had it, about a week?
I've had it about a week.
Okay.
My Steam hours total about to 5.
I got more zeros on my 5.
So I decided that I wasn't going to look up anything. I was just going to jump straight in, jump into the deep end and see what I could put together. I started in the sandbox mode, and the first thing I tried to do is, just try to get into space. I don't know what I'm going to do there, but I'm going to try to get there. So I did the base tutorial, and I managed to launch a can into space. It didn't make it much farther than that, but he's out there somewhere, watching, waiting.
How difficult was it for you to build your first spaceship?
Not very. One part that kind of got me is in the propulsion tab. The fuel and the thrusters are all just kind of mixed together, and I wasn't sure what went with what. So to have sub-tabs or something would have been a little bit easier.
Right.
But eventually I found a couple things that worked with a couple other things just because they looked similar.
Okay.
And so I was able to eventually just get a giant fuel can and a giant thruster and just send it off.
Well, let's see. So you have made it. Have you gone into orbit yet?
Well, going into orbit is just having something floating out there.
Well, I mean, an orbit is where you are making a complete circle of the planet without coming back.
I'm not sure, because after he made it out there, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to keep him out there or if anything bad would happen, so I reverted it.
Okay. Okay. Oh, so you reverted back to launch.
Yeah.
Okay. Gee, I've never done that.
Yeah, I've gone back to the hangar quite a bit. Now, what I've been working on recently, which recently out of the total of 5 hours I've done on this game, is I've been trying to just...
I just hit the microphone. Sorry.
I've just been trying to get... I've been using the runway now, and after plenty of times of it just, pile driving itself into the ground, I managed to get it off the ground, and I'm learning how to steer itself.
Oh, okay.
So I'm making gliders right
Okay,
now.
yeah. Yeah, you can do both. I'll be honest, I haven't spent a whole lot of time with the airplane part, and this is actually going to lead into my next question, which is, there is an age difference between us. I was born in 1963. You were born...
1987.
Okay, so obviously a big difference. I grew up during the space race. Okay, when I was a kid, the Apollo program was going. I was aware when Apollo 8 went around the moon. I remember very clearly watching Apollo 11 land, and of course they got out and walked on the moon. I wanted to be an astronaut until Apollo 13, and that's when I realized you could get killed doing this. And I decided something, I wanted to be a cowboy or something. But this game is something that I have waited for my whole life. My inner 10-year-old has been wanting this game for 40, 50 years. Is that different? Is the game different for me because of my background than it is for you?
I would say with the generation I grew up in and the technology level that I started off on, it was already known and it was part of history that we had, been into space and been on the moon, but you didn't see much beyond that. And there were, space shuttle launches, and you would hear about those sort of things, but it didn't have as much of an impact.
Right.
It was, we've kind of been there and done that, and it's always a significant thing whenever humans can get into space, whenever they can leave the planet. But we still had kids hoping to be astronauts. I think cowboys had gone down a little bit, and I have to say as a counterpoint, I think the mortality rate of cowboys is pretty high.
Yeah.
I've met more astronauts. I haven't met many cowboys. So I just got to say, one of them's still in business.
I will say probably the highlight of my life, or one of the high points in my life, I actually got to meet and interview Jim Lovell. Jim Lovell was on Apollo 8, which was the first mission to ever leave. It was the first time human beings ever left the Earth and went to another body in space. They went around the moon, and they did it without the lunar module. A lot of people don't realize how significant that is, because Jim Lovell was also on Apollo 13, and the only thing that kept them alive was the fact they had that lunar module that they could use as a lifeboat. Without the lunar module, they wouldn't have had an engine. There are a lot of things they wouldn't have had. They wouldn't have survived. So it's a good thing what happened on Apollo 13 didn't happen on Apollo 8. But that was a very risky mission, going around the moon with just one engine. But I remember meeting him, and you know that kind of almost contact high you can get.
Yeah, starstruck.
Yeah. For like a week, I was walking around going, I met Jim Lovell. I met Jim Lovell.
It's kind of a striking feeling to be better than other people, It's like once you hit that, you're like, man, they'll never get to do this.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'll tell you, he was an extremely nice guy. The real funny part was, I have a copy of the book A Man on the Moon by Andrew Chaikin. Okay, well, Jim Lovell has written a book himself called Lost Moon, which is the book that they based the movie Apollo 13 on, and it's about that mission. Well, so I do this interview, and then I said, I'd like you to sign my book, please. And I reach in my pocket, and I get out, or not my pocket, my bag. I reach and I get out this hardcover of A Man in the Moon, and there's this little split second where I could see his face fall. Like, it's like, hey, dummy, that's not my book. And I was like, but you're in it. It's an astronaut book.
It's close enough, right?
Yeah. Which, what I thought was real funny? He signed his name, Jim Lovell, and then he wrote under it Apollo 13. I'm surprised. To me, Apollo 8, considering it was the first time we ever left,
would be the one that...
You would think that would be, but the public, they know two missions.
Yeah.
Apollo 11 and Apollo 13. They know that we walked on the moon Apollo 11, and they know they saw a movie called Apollo 13.
Yeah, I mean...
And that was the entire space program.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where it was, is talking about the generation, experience. It's just, those are things that happened, and there's these significant ones, and everything else kind of falls to the wayside. And it's just, starting off, it's a known thing that we've been to space. So everything after that, as far as its impact on my generation was, some people wanted to be astronauts, and that's cool, but, other people want to do other things, more focused on any other popular media stuff.
Well, what I think is so cool about Kerbal Space Program is it gives you a real sense of just how difficult it is. Because I have actually had people say to me, in essence, when you talk about going to the moon and things like that, in essence, their attitude is, been there, done that.
Yeah.
Like, how hard can it be to get to the moon?
We did it once,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We did it that one time. How hard can it be? Well, this game kind of teaches you just how hard it can be.
Yeah, it has a major impact with, like, whenever they landed the Curiosity rover. I mean, if you had to spend any amount of time thinking about all the logistics of that, it's daunting.
It's trying to slam dunk a basketball from several million miles away with a blindfold on.
Yeah, the amount of math and physics involved, a lot of people think, oh, we've been there now, so we just, hit autopilot and it takes care of it.
And that was actually one of my questions. When I decided to do this podcast, I went on Reddit and I said, I'm wanting to do this podcast. Here's a list of questions. If you don't mind, I'd like some answers. And I got one response, and people started upvoting me. And I thought, oh man, this is going to be great. People are going to love this.
You're going to get famous now.
I'm going to get famous. Yeah, exactly. Well, my posting on Reddit, which had been getting upvoted and was slowly moving its way up to the top, all of a sudden just stopped. And then it started falling, and it went out of the top 50 and out of the top 100 and the top 200. And I got to a point where I thought, oh man, we're going to be like the scrappiest little podcast out there. A devoted audience of 3 people, and 2 of them are us.
We're going to be the first and last.
The one and only.
The record setting.
But then after that, I actually started getting more responses. But what I wanted to do, the very first person who responded to me, I wanted to make sure that I went ahead and went through his answers because he was the one that was willing to kind of, jump in the deep end of the pool with us. My first question was, is your username based on an astronaut or something from space history? Obviously, mine is Biff Aldrin, so we all know that mine is. His username is Comet192. My next question...
Where are you located?
Right, and he says he's from Belgium. And then if you'll notice, the question that I had just asked you, how has the game changed your perception of space? His response, I am actually looking to major in astrophysics in college because of this game. That blows me away.
Yeah, and just completely change your career path based on a video game and it not be to make video games.
What I like about that, you and I were talking about the generational difference. When I was growing up and the space program was going full bore, there were a lot of people that they wanted to be astronauts, or they wanted to be engineers, or they wanted to get involved in science in some way. And it was because of what was going on with the space program. Well, now that that's not going on like it was, a lot of that has kind of fallen by the wayside. And I love the idea that a video game could inspire that kind of optimism and inspire somebody to actually change their major. I think that's really cool. Neil deGrasse Tyson, a man that I greatly admire. He does his own podcast, by the way. It's called Star Talk. And if you have not heard it, this is my shameless plug. Go listen to Star Talk. He also is director of the Hayden Planetarium in New York. And he's hosting the new Cosmos television show, which is very good too. When you get done listening to Star Talk, go watch Cosmos. But he was actually called in front of the Senate, I can't remember the exact title, but it was basically the Senate Science Committee. And he made the comment to them that the United States is falling behind because we stopped dreaming.
After we stopped going to the moon, it all ended. We stopped dreaming. And so I worry that decisions that Congress makes doesn't factor in the consequences of those decisions on tomorrow.
We are mortgaging our future by not investing in the space program. Okay, my next question, I said, tell the story of your best or worst experience in the game. Best mission, Worst crash, dumbest mistake. And I'm going to ask you that question, but I want to read his answer very quickly. Comet192 said, quote, "My worst mission was the one I sent to Duna. My lander didn't have enough delta V to get out of Duna's orbit, but just enough to crash into Ike."
Okay, the worst crash I had was, I eventually was like, well, the best way to get to space is to get there as fast as possible. So you strap a whole bunch of rockets on, and I thought that the gigantic wings, the delta-sized wings,
yeah.
I thought they could do what the little ones did and just steer it. No, they're pretty stationary.
They don't move.
So I just watched in horror as no matter what button I pressed, it only happened faster. As it just eventually some sort of wind hit it, or the hand of God eventually just guided this thing straight down into the ground. And I managed to deploy the pod before, but then they all hit the ground, and one of them flew back up and took the pod out.
See, again, I say that the whole point of this game is to kill Kerbals.
Which means I'm actually on the road to success.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I said, what's your best mission and your worst crash and your dumbest mistake? For me, it was all the same mission. I am so fortunate that I can tell one story and cover all three of those. I built like the perfect ship. Okay?
Yeah.
Get it up into space. I went to the moon, or the mun, as they call it in the game. Landed. I got tons of science. I got back up. I rendezvoused. I got back to Kerbin. I deorbited. I had just enough fuel to deorbit. I was entering the atmosphere, and I was thinking, man, I have got this thing nailed. No parachutes.
Oh.
Yeah, I nailed something.
Yeah.
The ground at about 400 miles an hour.
Did you even have the decoupler to separate the
Oh,
pod?
yeah.
Okay.
I separated the pod and everything. But, if I had fuel, I could have maybe done a suicide burn.
Yeah.
Although, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure I had one of those little dinky engines,
Oh, okay.
that isn't going to suicide burn anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, take a lesson from me and just put the most massive engine you can on it. So if you're going to do anything, go big or go home.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, let's move on to our next item, which is the news. And that's something that we want to do in the podcast. We want to try and keep up with kind of the things that are going on. Let me go ahead and start. I've got one. An update has been posted on the Kerbal Space Program website by the man himself, the game creator, Felipe, a.k.a. Harvester. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, Philippe or Felipe.
Well, he can come on the show and correct us.
There you go. There you go. If I am mispronouncing your name, my apologies. I assume it is Felipe.
We'll let you slap him on air.
Isn't that something? Can you imagine doing a podcast and the next day the game creator, you get like an email, it's like, I hate you guys. Well, that Nostromo guy's okay, but
it's a very short run.
There you go. Biff Aldrin, he's banned for life. I'm talking like a pirate. I was doing news.
Yeah, Felipe the Pirate.
Yeah, Felipe the Pirate. Okay.
News.
Okay. Felipe tells us that work is continuing on the latest update to the game, which is 0.24, but they're not as close to release as first thought. According to the post, the 0.24 update was play tested, and the results were unenthusiastic. Felipe writes, quote, "We realized the contract system serves no purpose if there isn't a need for the rewards they offer. That means we still have a few features that need to be added. As a result, Squad will now be moving the core essentials of budgets into update 0.24 instead of 0.25 as originally planned. That includes the requirement to spend money, to launch vessels, and purchase parts in R&D. You know what makes me sad about that?
What's that?
I'm going to have to manage money now.
Yeah.
Getting into orbit and landing on things and not dying, that was hard enough. Now I have to manage money.
Yeah,
I can't even manage my own money.
I've been watching my bank account crash and burn longer than I have the Kerbals. And I just got to say, it's like, if I was depressed before about these little green guys dying, I'll be more upset to watch all my little green presidents running away.
There you go. There you go. Now, you had a comment that you wanted to make about the reward system.
Yeah, it's with reward system, it's called gamification, to where if you build a quality reward system, it motivates players, but there's some rewards that just aren't quality. So if you were to take a Xbox game and it gives you an achievement for reaching level 2, well, you're going to do it anyway, so it doesn't really feel worthwhile. But if it's something that would actually give you a reward in game, and you do something out of the ordinary for it, then it actually feels like you're growing towards something, or adventuring, or exploring the game, instead of just going through the motions in order to get just the next thing that you were going to get anyway.
I like that that's what they're doing here. In essence, they're saying we haven't hit that sweet spot that you're talking about, so rather than rush something out the door that isn't ready, we're going to take our time. I like that.
Yeah, in any video game, I've always liked it when the developer says, we need more time. There's this sweet spot of time where you don't want to, if it happens too soon, then it's going to have a lot of errors, and they're just doing it for the sake of getting it out there and being done with it. And then there's the, if they go way too long, there's just not enough interest, and they may have overthought it. But just holding off because people aren't liking it yet is definitely a good reason to hold off on anything.
I think that's why video games based on movies, where they have rush development,
yeah.
I think that's why movie games are typically the worst. Because, they have, 3 weeks to build the game?
Yeah.
Like that.
I don't know. I know who's in it, but I don't know what happens.
Yeah.
Here's fewer trailers than the public saw. Good luck.
Wait a minute. That's supposed to look like Emma Stone? Okay, next news article.
According to PC Gamer magazine, mods for Kerbal Space Program will soon be moving to a new website, curse.com, curse.com. PC Gamer says, quote, "The functional but not great database at Kerbal Spaceport has been a source of friction in the community, even as it grew and created a lot of great content," end quote. Kerbal Spaceport will no longer be accepting mods, and community members will transfer their work over to the new site.
I wonder if that means that everything that's on Spaceport now is going to get transferred to curse.com, or if you submitted a mod in the past, you're going to have to resubmit it to the new site.
It's kind of double-edged, because if they don't automatically take it over,
a lot of junk's going to...
Yeah, they get the advantage of cleaning house.
Right.
But whenever the new site comes up, it's going to have a lot of content hitting it if everyone needs to resubmit. But if you are using a mod that isn't constantly updated, and maybe a little outdated in that, you may want to get in contact with the modder, or see if anyone's going to rehost that mod.
Right, because it may disappear for a little while at least. They said that it's been a source of friction in the community. I guess I'm easygoing. I mean, I understand that it's not that easy to browse mods the way it is now, but it's never been a source of friction with me. It was more just kind of a, oh, well.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to the point where I'm modding the game yet, so I'm kind of taking the game as is, but if this new site is up by then, I would definitely like to see if the format changes.
Okay, last thing that we have under news, and I got this from Reddit. I thought this was very interesting. There's a website called space.stackexchange.com, and the question was asked, how accurate is Kerbal Space Program? And they responded by saying, it's somewhat of a medium fidelity simulation. It manages a few things quite well and a few things not as well. They say orbit, quite accurate, staging, somewhat accurate, use of fuel. Under bad, they said only one body seems to affect an orbiting object, the object of most influence. They say there are plenty of multi-object systems which aren't managed at all correctly. Lagrange points aren't taken into account. And for someone who doesn't know what a Lagrange point is, very simple explanation. It's essentially the intersection point of two gravitational fields, and there's more than one point. There's actually several. There's 5, but that's an easy way to think about it. And what they're saying is, for example, when you travel from the Earth to the Moon, there is a point at which the Moon's pull is stronger than the Earth's pull, and they're saying that there are no points like that in the game. This is something I found interesting. Under the bad, they said the aerodynamics model is quite poor. Basically, every object produces a constant drag. Adding a nose cone increases the drag of the system. If that is true, that's going to change how I'm building my ships, because I've always put nose cones on there.
Yeah, I haven't had a ship that's needed a nose cone yet, because the pod has been the front, and it didn't make sense, with
Thank you, Max
nose cone on there. But that's something that I thought it would, make it more aerodynamic, and I knew that wings would help in piloting it, but I guess all nose cones do now is it's an aesthetic and more weight.
Right. I have a feeling this is something that will be changed in the future, because we talked about the update, and I said it's 0.24 and 0.25. The reason it's not 1.24 is they haven't reached 1 yet. The game is still technically in beta.
Yeah, kind of like how Minecraft was in beta for a really long, alpha and then beta.
Yeah, right. When I actually started the game, this is something you mentioned earlier. You said you started in sandbox mode. Mm-hmm. When I started playing the game, there was no career mode. It was just sandbox.
Yeah, I've been thinking about starting the career mode because it may start me off with fewer things, so there's not as many options, and I may get closer to making something like a spaceship.
It might. I can't say because I started in sandbox, and so that's what I know. But I can see that career mode, because if you start in career, you've got just a handful of pieces, whereas in sandbox, you've got 50 different pieces, and you don't know what half of them do.
Yeah, the one thing I do fear is, since you may have only so much money that you make from anything,
right,
you may not be able to afford the pieces you need, or you buy something thinking it's one thing,
right,
and it's not the thing you need.
Last thing on the list here, we're still on how accurate is Kerbal. There was the good, there was the bad, now here's the ugly. They said, the ugly, no life support requirements. I give Kerbal a pass on this one for one simple reason. Here's my question. How do we know what the life support requirements of Kerbals are? Apparently, the only thing that will kill these guys is a high-speed impact.
I think they feed off of a steady diet of fear and anxiety. Because
my Kerbals are fat.
Because all of mine have looked pretty healthy, and they all knew what was coming.
Nothing seems to faze them, does it? Okay, so let's move on to our last topic, and this is something I call But I Digress. And this is where we briefly talk about non-Kerbal stuff. I'll let you go with this one.
I'll go with other games that I've been playing. I've been playing FTL, Faster Than Light. It's a
good game,
space-themed roguelike.
Mm-hmm.
The game's a lot of fun, and I've been playing it for a while, but I recently started again because they released an advanced edition. And the advanced edition is really cool. It introduced 2 more spaceships, and it introduced a lot more options. So the random events that happen, there's a lot more variance instead of running into the same ones. And I don't mean to brag, which it's not bragging at all. I finally managed to defeat the flagship on my 200th run.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
What's nice is when they released the enhanced edition, they also released a version of it for the iPad, which I was playing FTL. I was playing FTL and Minecraft a lot, and then I found Kerbal, and I haven't played anything since. But it's nice to have it FTL on my iPad for when I'm at work or when I'm not at home or whatever. It's a nice little game. It works really well on the iPad.
Yeah, I was wondering how it worked on the iPad because you have to click a bunch of small things like individual doors and the guys. How does it work? Does it work well?
You replace the mouse cursor with your fingertip or a stylus. I mean, it works literally the same.
Okay, yeah, I'm not very touchscreen proficient. I got kind of chunky fingers. So I just imagine my ship being on fire and my hand going through the iPad.
There you go. So. Well, that's if you just pound on it really hard. Okay, so that's the end of But I Digress, and I guess that's the end of our podcast as well. I would like to say that if you have questions, if you have comments, suggestions, constructive criticism, be sure and contact us. Our email address is
Kerbalpodcast@gmail.com.
Okay, well, as we wrap it up, I do want to say a big thank you to Squad. They have been very supportive of this podcast. I contacted them and told them I wanted to do it, and they said go for it, and we'll be glad to help you any way they can.
They've been very supportive.
Yes. Check out, be sure and buy their game. Be sure and go to their website and check into the forums, everything. So a big thanks to that. Also, the music you hear. We want to thank that individual.
That is Professor Soap. You can reach his website at facebook.com/Professor Soap, and from there you can find links to download his tracks for free, and he also has a lot of good merchandise in his store.
And that is Kerbalcast. Once again, I am your LMP Biff Aldrin, and my CMP
Nostromo.
Don't forget, our email address is kerbalpodcast@gmail.com. And thanks for listening.